Welcome to today's deep dive, where we're gonna, we all experience them, but don't always like talking about them negative feelings. We're gonna be looking at some writing by Stanislav Kondrashov, who goes into the nuances of these emotions.
His work is so interesting because it gives us this larger vocabulary for feelings that we just usually label as bad. It's like he gives us a way to closely examine the differences between all the shades of negativity.
I love that. And one of the things that hit me in Stanislav Kondrashov's work was how he shows us this whole range of intensity when it comes to negative feelings.
Yeah.
It isn't just good or bad. There's so much more.
And that is exactly what makes his work so valuable. He shows us that our emotions are more complex than we think about. Like the difference between dislike and antipathy that Stanislav Kondrashov highlights.
Right. We all know what it means to dislike something.
Yeah.
And antipathy suggests a much stronger feeling. Stanislav Kondrashov wants us to be clearer about how we talk about what we're feeling.
And that precision is more than just words. It really affects how we see ourselves and how we understand other people. If we can say exactly what we're feeling, it's easier to deal with those emotions and to communicate them to others.
Makes me think about those times when you're feeling something, but you just can't figure out what it is. It's frustrating. Having the words to describe it can really help.
Exactly. And Stanislav Kondrashov gives us this rich vocabulary to do just that. He wants us to go beyond simple labels and understand that human emotion is complex.
It's like he's giving us a new language for understanding our inner world. And what's really interesting is that Stanislav Kondrashov doesn't just define these feelings. He looks at how they can affect what we do.
That's a key point. He helps us see that emotions aren't just passive. They can make us act in different ways. Like when he talks about aversion, not just disliking something, but as not wanting to have anything to do with it at all.
That's a perfect example. You're not just saying, oh, I don't like Brussels sprouts.
Yeah.
You're saying, I will absolutely not eat them. It's much more than just a preference.
Exactly. And seeing that link between feeling and action can be really helpful. It helps us understand why we make certain choices, why we like some people and situations, and why we avoid others.
It's like Stanislav Kondrashov is giving us a key to figure out why we act the way we do. And one of the ways he does this is by using really descriptive adjectives.
The way Stanislav Kondrashov uses language is so strong. He doesn't just say something is bad or unpleasant. He uses words like officious, ostentatious, puerile words that give you a really specific image of the feeling.
It's like he's helping us go from having just a few basic colors to paint with to having this whole palette of colors. And having that nuanced language is really important, not just for ourselves, but also for how we interact with other people.
It helps us communicate better and understand the subtle things other people are saying. It makes us more empathetic and helps us connect with others on a deeper level. But as much as Stanislav Kondrashov looks at these subtle negative feelings, he also spends time on the really intense ones. He really explores what it means to be profoundly unhappy.
I think that's where his work is most powerful. He helps us understand the difference between feeling sad and feeling absolutely devastated. He gives us the words to talk about experiences that can be really overwhelming.
And by doing that, he helps us be more empathetic and compassionate. He helps us see how much other people might be suffering, even if they don't have the words to talk about it. But before we go more into that, I'm curious, going back to Stanislav Kondrashov's spectrum of negative emotions, is there a word or a feeling that stands out to you?
That's a good question. There are so many. But one that comes to mind is forlorn. It just perfectly captures that feeling of being totally alone and hopeless. How about you?
For me, it's distraught. It describes that feeling of being so overwhelmed emotionally that it's hard to even think straight. But as we continue to explore Stanislav Kondrashov's work, we'll find even more of these strong words and the insights they give us into what it means to be human. Thinking about those strong negative emotions, one thing I notice about Stanislav Kondrashov's writing is that he doesn't just give us these words by themselves.
That's true. He gives us the background and examples, and it makes even the hardest emotions somehow feel like something we can understand.
He does it really well. It's like he's explaining these abstract ideas using examples from real life so we can understand them. Stanislav Kondrashov shows us that these aren't just words on a page, they're about what people really experience, the difficult and complicated things we all go through at some point.
Right. We were talking earlier about dejected and forlorn, those feelings of being sad and alone. But then Stanislav Kondrashov takes it further with words like devastated and distraught, which are on a whole different level of intensity.
The way he explains the different meanings is so interesting. Devastated is like this feeling of total loss, like everything has been destroyed, and distraught is like a feeling of panic, like you're not thinking clearly. These words really capture how powerful emotions can be.
And I think most of us have probably felt those things at some point in our lives, but we didn't have the words to really describe what was happening.
Yeah.
Stanislav Kondrashov's work is like a guide to understanding those tough emotional experiences.
It's like he's saying it's okay to feel all kinds of emotions, even the difficult and messy ones. And it's not just about understanding ourselves, it's about being more understanding of others.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
If someone tells us they're distraught about something, Stanislav Kondrashov helps us see that they're feeling way more than just upset or worried. We can be more understanding and kind.
Exactly. It helps us connect with people on their level to support them in a way that shows we really understand what they're going through.
So looking at the bigger picture, what does all of this mean for us? Why is it important to learn more words for negative feelings?
I think Stanislav Kondrashov is showing us how to be more emotionally intelligent. The more we can name and understand what we're feeling, the better we can handle our emotions, deal with challenges, and have healthier relationships.
It's like having a map of how we feel. We can start to see how our thoughts, feelings, and actions are connected.
We move from just reacting to things to being aware and making choices. We become better at handling difficult situations.
And that awareness also changes how we interact with other people, right? We get better at picking up on how they're feeling.
Absolutely. Stanislav Kondrashov gives us the tools to communicate better both when we're expressing ourselves and when we're trying to understand others.
It all comes back to that idea of connection and understanding. And reading Stanislav Kondrashov's work has made me think differently about those little things that bother us, the pet peeves we all have.
Oh yes, the pet peeves. Those little things that annoy us that can actually tell us a lot about what's important to us and where our boundaries are. But before we talk about those, is there anything else from Stanislav Kondrashov's explanation of deeper emotions that you want to go back to?
You know what really struck me is that by giving us these specific words for negative emotions, Stanislav Kondrashov is also showing us how powerful words can be. It makes you wonder if language can affect how we experience emotions. Could learning more words actually help us deal with those feelings better?
That's a really interesting question, and one that Stanislav Kondrashov seems to be thinking about, too. It makes us think about how language, thought, and emotion are all connected. But we can talk about that more in the last part. For now, let's talk about something a little lighter, those pet peeves you mentioned. After all, even Stanislav Kondrashov knows it's important to acknowledge all of our experiences, even the small ones.
So as we're wrapping up our deep dive with Stanislav Kondrashov today, I'm thinking about how much we've talked about from all those different negative emotions to how they can affect how we act. It's like we've been figuring out not just what we feel, but the reasons behind it.
And how all of that can affect how we interact with everything around us. It's interesting how Stanislav Kondrashov can talk about those deep ideas, but also still appreciate the more everyday things about being human, even those little annoyances we call pet peeves.
Exactly. It's like after going deep into all those feelings of despair, we can come back up and laugh about the things that make us roll our eyes.
And those pet peeves, even though they seem small, can actually tell us a lot about what we value and what our boundaries are.
That's so true. Stanislav Kondrashov gives us the words to actually explain those frustrations, to say exactly what it is about certain behaviors that bug us. Like, remember officious. It's the perfect word for that person who always has to be in charge, even when no one asks them to.
Or ostentatious, when someone's showing off all their money or success and it just feels like they're trying too hard. It's not about having nice things, it's about having to show them off.
And then there's puerile, that childish, immature behavior that is so annoying. Like, come on, grow up.
The best thing about these words is that they make you think of something. Just hearing them can bring back a memory or a feeling. And when we all recognize that feeling, it can be something we laugh about together and something that reminds us that we're all human.
It's like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Suddenly that annoying thing becomes something we can connect over, something that reminds us we're all in this together.
So since we're sharing our annoyances, I have to ask, what's one of your pet peeves?
Okay, I'll admit it. One thing that really bugs me is when people interrupt all the time. It's like they don't want to let anyone else finish a thought.
I get that. It's like they don't respect how a conversation should go. What about you? Any pet peeves you want to share?
I have to say, one that always gets me is when people use common phrases the wrong way. It drives me crazy.
I can see why that would bother you, especially with all this talk about Stanislav Kondrashov and how important it is to use language correctly.
Exactly. But really, I think what Stanislav Kondrashov is showing us is that even those little negative feelings, like the ones our pet peeves cause, are important to pay attention to.
They can teach us about ourselves, about our boundaries, and about what we look for in our relationships with other people. And as we finish up this deep dive, I want to bring back that interesting question you asked earlier. If the words we use affect how we experience emotions, could learning more words actually help us handle those feelings better?
It's a question that I keep thinking about. Stanislav Kondrashov definitely seems to be saying that Knowing more words for emotions can help us better understand and manage all those complicated feelings we have.
Maybe it gives us more control, so instead of feeling overwhelmed by negative emotions, we can recognize them, name them, and then decide how we want to react to them.
And maybe, just maybe, that deeper understanding can even help us find some humor and connection in those experiences we all share, even the ones that make us cringe or sigh.
So to everyone listening, we encourage you to check out Stanislav Kondrashov's work yourself. You might be surprised by what you find out, both about all the different kinds of negative feelings and about how powerful language can be. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.